committing to defend Taiwan. After Joe Biden said the US will come to Taiwan's defense, the White House issued a statement saying its policy is unchanged. Beijing hits back at what it calls a malicious report. China reacts to a landslide European Parliament vote for stronger ties with Taiwan. And it's all politics. As a lawmaker faces ejection from Parliament, we look at what's behind Taiwan's practice of unseating legislators. Quarantine-free travel is on the cards for many countries. But what about Taiwan? We'll be talking to the president of Medigen on the future of the homegrown vaccine. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. In what appeared to be a major policy shift, President Biden said on American television that the country will defend Taiwan in the event of an attack by China. But the White House said afterwards that there is no change in U.S. policy toward Taiwan. This exchange from a CNN town hall has been making the rounds on Twitter.
China just tested sonic missile. What will you do to keep up with them militarily, and can you vow to protect Taiwan?
Yes and yes. We are militarily, China, Russia, and the rest of the world knows we have the most powerful military in the history of the world. China understand that we are not going to step back. We are not going to change any of our views.
So are you saying that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that.
Washington is obligated by U.S. law to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself, but doesn't have a commitment to defend the nation. It's long followed a policy of not saying whether it would intervene militarily if China attacked Taiwan. Colin Koh, a research fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, said that the Biden administration faced competing pressures over China and Taiwan.
While the Biden administration is very keen to engage in a long-term competition with China, at the same time, it is very careful to try to manage this very tense relationship going forward. And at the same time, it's important to also acknowledge that the Biden administration and the previous Trump administration actually acknowledge the strategic importance of Taiwan for the Indo-Pacific strategy. So I think these are competing pressures that the Biden administration will have to negotiate going forward. So I think it's important to look at the clarity in the policy position going forward after Biden made the very recent remark.
Beijing has hit back at a European Parliament landslide vote calling for deepening ties with Taiwan. On Wednesday, members of Parliament cast ballots in support of the first ever report focusing exclusively on relations with Taiwan. And as James Chater reports, it's not the only pressure point China is currently facing.
A familiar scene whenever Taiwan receives support on the international stage. The European Parliament's approval of a report recommending closer ties with Taiwan drew an unsurprisingly strong response from Beijing.
欧洲议会通过的上述报告严重违反国际关系基本准则，严重违反一个中国原则，严重违反欧盟在台湾问题上做出的公开承诺，性质和影响恶劣。中方对此表示强烈谴责和坚决反对。
In contrast, Taiwan's foreign ministry publicly thanked the EU body, saying the vote signaled that Taiwan is not alone. It was an outcome that China had reportedly feared. On Thursday, the Hong Kong newspaper South China Morning Post reported that the Chinese ambassador to the EU had called on the Parliament president to, quote, leverage his position to influence lawmakers before the vote. In the letter, the ambassador wrote of the seriousness and sensitivity of the Taiwan issue, saying there is simply no room for compromise. But Europe is not the only front where Beijing is coming under pressure. On Thursday, in the UN General Assembly Rights Committee, China's ambassador to the UN, Zhang Jun, responded fiercely to calls for an inspection of Xinjiang province, where China is accused of holding internment camps for Uyghurs.
What I should point out again is that this visit should be a friendly one, should not be a so-called investigation with presumed guilt. That's not acceptable to China.
And Beijing faced more criticism on its treatment of Taiwan, with a senior US State Department official saying that China had misused UN Resolution 2758, which bars Taiwan from participation in the organization. This Monday marks 50 years since that resolution was adopted, and as the anniversary nears, the geopolitical heat on Beijing shows no signs of letting up. Chris Ma and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
The EU's Taiwan report is a non-binding document, meaning that the bloc is not legally required to follow any of the suggestions. But Zsuzsa Anna Ferenczi, an EU foreign policy expert, argues that it can still lead to changes in the way the EU deals with Taiwan.
Because up to now, the European Union, the different institutions and member states always refer to Taiwan in the framework of EU-China relations. So this report enables a shift away from that and encourages and even urges the institutions and member states to start seeing Taiwan on its own merit as a democracy. But at the same time, with this shift, I think it's equally important to stress that MEPs, members of the European Parliament, urge seeing Taiwan in the context of the EU's turn towards the Indo-Pacific. For the past few months, we've seen an increasing interest in member states to see the Indo-Pacific as a region where the EU has its own interests to protect, and seeing Taiwan at the core of that strategy, which was actually recently published, it is significant. And this is also a good moment to recall that the European Union is the #1 investor in Taiwan, which means that the EU has interest to protect, but the EU also has to see Taiwan as this like-minded democracy that faces authoritarian threat. And so overall, it is significant in just by having it on the agenda. The European Parliament is shaping the discourse in Brussels that Taiwan needs to be elevated.
How far can the EU and member states go while still abiding by the One China policy?
Well, that is a good question. And we've seen the European member states already engage Taiwan in their cooperation, and they uphold the right to engage with third countries as their sovereign right. And I believe that what we've seen unfold in the past year and 2 years with the image problem that China has in Europe and the hostility and the anxieties that this has really nourished inside the EU, we see, I think, more willingness in member states to conduct their cooperation. And we also see with this report a willingness to elevate Taiwan as a partner for the EU as a whole in semiconductors, in technology, and to see Taiwan as of strategic importance to the EU as a whole. Again, this is important in the context of the EU's self-perception and in the dynamics in the EU's self-perception and the role it wants to play in the Indo-Pacific. This is a long process and will continue as work in progress.
The National Basketball Association's Chinese partner has abruptly removed videos featuring the Boston Celtics from their website. It comes a day after Enes Kanter, a Turkish national who plays for the Celtics, lambasted Chinese President Xi Jinping for China's suppression of the Tibetan people. Tencent did not air Wednesday's game between the Celtics and New York Knicks. They also announced that future Celtics games will not be live-streamed in China. Flags are flying at half-mast at government, buildings and schools in Taiwan in honor of the 46 people who died in a fire in Kaohsiung last week. The death toll from the tragedy makes it the second worst building fire in Taiwan's history. Activists say the island has many buildings in a similar condition and are calling for more effective management regulations for rental properties.
I think the best way is to force the landowner to manage their building better, and we have better housing policy. In the process, we should have carrot and stick. For example, carrots, we have better maybe subsidy about, and we encourage this landowner to repair their house. Yeah, but at the same time, we have stick, right? Stick, maybe we have some penalty or fine. If they didn't manage their home very well, we could get some penalty. I think we need carrot and stick, not directly buyout.
Taiwan's government hopes to ease border restrictions once 30% of the population is fully vaccinated, possibly by the end of the month. Tough border controls have been in place since May, when the island experienced its first major COVID outbreak. Non-citizens and non-residents of Taiwan may only enter with special permission or emergency or humanitarian grounds. At present, 65% of the country's population have received at least one COVID jab, but only 24% are fully vaccinated. The government hopes to raise that figure to 30% by the end of October. It will then consider easing the restrictions on entering the country. Starting in November, the government will also allow the public to get mixed shots of the AstraZeneca and Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines. With concern rising globally about fresh outbreaks and the waning efficacy of vaccines, the United States has now approved booster shots for all its vaccines. Here in Taiwan, Medigen is working on a second-generation vaccine that will be more effective against variants. I sat down with the President Charles Chen to ask about booster shots and the locally made vaccines' progress in getting international approval.
Personally, and also from a scientific data, it shows that booster vaccine seems to be necessary, especially for the new variant or for the group people that has a lower immunoabilities. So I think the booster shot, in my opinion, is necessary. So Medigen has started the development of the new so-called second-generation vaccine for the booster purpose, but also for the prevention of the variant spread. So Medigen has developed a second generation, which proven to be pretty good against the non-variant so far. But of course, this is animal trial, so the proof of concept is being there.
And so when do you expect to move to clinical trials?
We plan to have that clinical trial, if possible, end of this year.
Could you outline the steps that still need to be taken? So I understand that Medigen is have sent data to the European authority, and then what are the steps after that?
I think the first step, of course, is get their approval that we can do the application, right? So that step is being complete. So we are now in the process of discussing about the details, which means that should we provide additional documents, or should we carry additional clinical trial in order to meet their requirements? And this is ongoing. And I believe that very soon we'll get their response, because as you know, when it comes to COVID-19 vaccine, everything is fast-tracked. So we do have a strong belief that things will go very quickly and very smoothly.
We get the approval from the Europeans, then you say that we become listed on the EUL.
Once you get either an EMA approval or US FDA or even Australia TGA, then you are entitled to be in the list of the WHO EUL.
Thailand will begin allowing vaccinated visitors from 46 countries to skip mandatory quarantine on entering the country. The new regulations will begin on November 1st. Exempted countries include the United Kingdom, United States, China, Singapore and Australia. Taiwan is not on the list. To qualify, visitors must arrive by air, present a negative COVID test result and must be vaccinated. Strict entry laws and quarantine measures have allowed Thailand to keep COVID outbreaks under control, but the country's vital tourism industry plunged by 82%. Coming up after the break, we take you to meet an Indigenous weaver with an eye for originality.
Hello, Taiwan. I'm Dr. Jane Goodall. I'm so very happy to see Taiwan sharing its wonderful stories with the world. I've been fortunate enough to visit Taiwan on many occasions, and I've been to several different parts of the country. So I know firsthand something of the beauty of its wildlife and the marvelous people who are working to save these places. So good luck with this wonderful program.
And I want to know, what do you want to see more of on TaiwanPlus?
Hello, I'm Fabio Grandjean. Taiwan to the world. See you on TaiwanPlus.
Congratulations to TaiwanPlus.
Hello, Taiwan. I'm Mike Yamashita, National Geographic photographer. My stories have been as varied as the landscape itself, from Taiwan's top 10 tourist attractions to oolong tea, aquaculture, and the Taiwanese fishing industry, and most recently, the Daijia-Mazu pilgrimage. From TaiwanPlus, I would like to see stories on more of the same, about the varied cultural and historical aspects of the country.
Taiwan to the world. See you on TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan to the world. See you on TaiwanPlus.
Hello, Taiwan. I'm Baron Wanga, and greetings to you all from my humble homeland of Nauru. It's a worthwhile and appropriate platform whereby the unique perspectives of the people of Taiwan are portrayed and presented honestly. Taiwan to the world. See you on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Voters in Taiwan's second biggest city go to the polls on Saturday to decide whether to recall a legislator known for his pro-independence stance. Chen Bo-wei, a member of the pro-independence Taiwan State Building Party, represents Taichung's second electoral district. Last year, he achieved a major upset by narrowly defeating Yin Khvat. Yen belongs to a local political dynasty that has represented the district for the opposition Kuomintang for nearly 2 decades. Our reporter Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick asked New Bloom founding editor Brian Hugh why recalls have become a tactic for both the Pan-Greens, the parties associated with the ruling DPP, and Pan-Blue opposition parties.
The recalls were originally pushed as a measure by the Pan-Green camp, particularly by younger members of the Pan-Green camp, as a way to recall these older KMT politicians that have been there for decades and sometimes have histories of corruption and are wrapped up in scandals to get them out of office. This began after the Sunflower Move. But then after this was passed, after the benchmark to hold recall votes was lowered, this has become more used by the Pan-Blue camp as a way to target Pan-Green younger progressive legislators, sometimes the people that were pushing for the lowering of these benchmarks to begin with. This is framed by the KMT as a referendum on Taiwan's governance. Eric Chu indicated as such in his victory speech when he became the KMT chair, when he won the KMT chair election. But this began as a revenge recall against the fact that Han Kuo-yu, the Kaohsiung mayor and the last KMT presidential candidate, was recalled. That occurred by large margins. And so I think it's one of the frames for understanding this has been then it's a generational conflict between younger and older voters.
The KMT has been pouring a lot of resources into this race and campaigning with their political heavyweights. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, Chen Bo-wei is the only elected legislator from his party. So why does the KMT feel so strongly about this? And what do you think Chen Bo-wei's chances are of retaining his seat tomorrow?
Taichung is seen as having these entrenched old money gangster politics. And the Yin family is tied to the Matsu pilgrimage, which is the largest religious event in Taiwan and brings in a lot of followers and so forth, but is also seen as tied to these kind of gangster politics that are very tied up with Taichung localities. And so that's the kind of politics that Chen Bo is seen as having overcome. The KMT is trying to reassert its hold over traditional territories that it lost to the DPP in the past years, and trying to make inroads into the South sometimes, as seen with Han Kuo-yu's victory, thinking that it can take the South and oust the DPP there. The KMT is trying to push for the return to power of this political dynasty. Chen is accused of focusing on national level issues, but not local issues. And so he's seen as having a weaker presence in the area. And sometimes this is contending against the fact that KMT might be established in an area as local clientelist networks that go way back, whereas these younger politicians do not. But what's also interesting is that younger politicians have sought to break from traditional political practices. Younger candidates have sometimes emphasized wanting to focus on policy and win voters through policy rather than this kind of old personalist politics. But this might not work out electorally. And if Chen loses, I think this paves the way for the KMT to target other younger progressive politicians.
One person is dead and another injured following a shooting on a movie set outside of Santa Fe. American actor Alec Baldwin was holding a prop gun when it discharged, killing the director of photography and injuring the director. The shooting took place on the set of a Western movie that Baldwin is producing and starring in called Rust. A spokesperson for Baldwin told the Associated Press that the incident followed a miscommunication in which a prop gun was filled with blanks. No charges have been filed by police. In South Korea, around 80,000 workers rallied in 13 cities, demanding better labour rights and an increase in the minimum wage. The Korean Confederation of Trade Unions is staging the nationwide protests over several days. They are also calling for the right to form unions and for the government to ensure job security, medical care, housing and education. In the capital, Seoul, alone, 27,000 people took to the streets, many wearing outfits from the Netflix hit Squid Games. The city's government has filed a complaint against the rallies for violating social distancing restrictions. And here's the story of an artist from Taiwan's Paiwan tribe who recreates dream catchers, which capture the experiences of indigenous people around the world.
大家好，我叫伊亚斯，我是来自凉山部落的，然后目前在凉山部落做多媒材设计的工作。我现在做的是叫神之眼，它是国外的原住民的一个传统工艺，然后在以前有点像捕梦网的意思。孩子刚生出来的时候，父亲就会用一个十字形，他到满岁的时候，他就会绕一圈这样。 只要是过生日，他就会开始绕一圈，然后到一定的岁数之后，他就会把它编成一个比较完整的作品。就是你活得越久，面积会越大。那时候看到这个，是因为那时候也是在找一些文献，找关于原住民的一些工艺品，我就查到了国外的原住民的工艺。那就有一个国外的艺术家，他做的就是非常让我惊艳。他们的技巧就是五花八门，有的做的很简单，但有的做的非常的华丽。 所以学这个有一个好处，解除忧郁。我之前有一些教的妈妈们，他们就是觉得他做了这个之后很疗愈，这样子就是可以让他比较平静一点。我对图形也比较敏感，我看一个东西，然后就是把它变成绣文，就是我只是把它取代相片这样子而已，就是这么简单的是，我只是把当初的感觉变成一个图像出来这样子。 从小看家里人，就是我姐姐还有我妈妈，他们在绣十字绣，传统服饰上面也很多会使用十字绣。这样学完十字绣之后，我的工艺的世界就被打开了。然后第一个那时候我就在想，我那时候最好奇的东西是什么？就是树皮布这个东西。那刚好就是有一个机会，一个比赛，然后就报了，然后刚好也中了，就有那个机会就去学树皮布，它是可以做成一个布面这样子。我是不是也可以把刺绣的东西跟它合在一起？我觉得以前的人应该也会使用到相关的东西去做服饰之类。那时候本来是纯粹想要做服饰，那殊不知呢，就越来越严重了，就一直就是比较偏向艺术类的工作去前进这样子。因为我一直想要用传统的东西去 突破现在就是人们生活上面用到的器具。以前的工艺当然原本就是为了生活，只是后来比较方便一点，可以取得到那些东西，所以他们被淘汰掉。但是近年来大家又一直在推广就是环保，透过别的工艺方式，或是让它去更坚固啊，或是更有不一样的样子出来。就是因为我喜欢，就是去学新的东西，然后把东西融合在一起。就是我觉得树皮可能可以跟刺绣合在一起，它就变成一个新的作品出来。我喜欢是他们在一起融合的那种可能性。时尚的定义对我来说是，我觉得实用，或是还有适合自己。我觉得独一无二很重要啦，就是比如说我这个图文，我就大概卖了20个之后，我就不要了，我就换掉一个新的。
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus. We'll leave you with some images of the German Hot Air Balloon Championships. Stay safe and see you next time.